Yeah. Shall I start?
Yep.
Welcome to our weekly program, Ready to Give an Answer. We are concentrating our study on the first 11 chapters of Genesis because we feel this is the foundation of our Christian faith. And this is the area where it is full of questions from the secular society, trying to tell us that we came here on earth through evolution, through the Big Bang, through Darwinian evolution. But the Bible is very clear. In the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. In these chapters, Moses is concentrating on the importance of the fact of creation, the supernatural act of God, and the event of the creation, special creation of humans, and then the fall of mankind in chapter 3, and then the big punishment all over the world with the global flood and the Tower of Babel and the distribution of nations. This area is attacked from the world by different opinions and different views. And in our session today, we will concentrate on answering the question, is there a contradiction between the science, the modern science, and the Bible? And in order to answer this question, we need to define what is science and what is the Bible, and then we can see if there is a contradiction or not. So in our session today, we'll start with the question, how to think, because there are different types of science. But before I do that, I just remind you of the structure that we are following. We are following the 7 C's: creation, corruption, catastrophe, confusion, Christ, cross, consummation. We studied that in the last session, so I will not repeat that in detail, but the world wants us to deny the creation and to deny the sin entering into the world, the corruption, to deny the Noah's flood, which was a catastrophic event covering the whole world, and to deny the Tower of Babel. If we do that, we will destroy the first 4, and as a result, the last 3 will disappear as well, because the first 4 is the history in Genesis, and that's a real history. And then if that goes, the hope of the gospel will disappear as well. So let us try to answer the question, what is science? Science is knowledge, and there are 2 types of science: operation science and origin science. And we need to understand this very clearly, because if you understand the difference between the 2 types of science, we'll be able to understand the creation and we'll be able to judge if evolution is a real science or not. So, operation science and origin science. Let us start with the operation science, and this is a scientific method which deals with events in the presence and the present, and it is observable, repeatable experiment under the same conditions. You get the same results, and you find we do this type of science to find a sort of the recurrent behavior in the present physical world. So the operational science is a science which we do in the laboratory, and we have no problem with that type of science. Actually, we can't do operational science without having a lawgiver, because the operation science depends on the laws, and we try to find these laws and to apply them one time after the other. So the operation science really matches the clear understanding in Genesis that there is a God creator. So the operation science will give us the modern technology that we all enjoy, the aeroplanes that we travel in. It gives us understanding of the structure of the atoms. It gives us understanding of the structure of the DNA. It helps us to develop new drugs and to help us in the different operations in different parts of our life. So the operation science is a wonderful science, and there is no contradiction between operational science and the Bible. And there are great Christians who are great scientists who trusted the Lord Jesus Christ, who believe the Bible, and they practice the operational science. So the operational science, as I said, gives us all the modern technology that we can enjoy and we can benefit from. Let me give you a little video here to explain the difference between operational science and historical science or origin science. Because origin science deals with events that happened in the past and we cannot repeat them in the present time. So it depends on the starting point, and there is two different starting points. There is an atheist starting point, which depends on time, chance, and laws of nature. But there is a biblical starting point, which is in the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. So let us watch this video together, which will give the difference between observational or operational science and historical or origin science. And we'll repeat this again and again, because if we understand this fact about the difference between the two types of science, we'll be able to understand what is written in Genesis. So let us listen to this little video.
Have you ever heard this? Billions of years ago, there was an explosion in space. Or 100,000 years ago, this happened or that happened. Or even in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Question, how does anyone know? I mean, was anybody there to observe it? Well, actually somebody was, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Check this out. First of all, we need to recognize that there is a huge difference between observational science and historical science. Both are valuable, but very different. Let's define the two real quick, shall we? Observational science is simply when we observe something and experiment to draw conclusions. It involves repeatable experimentation and observations in the present. It's through observational science that we find cures for diseases and build space shuttles, stuff like that. Now, through historical science, we consider things that happened in the past, but they cannot be checked in the same way. I mean, we don't have access to the past like we do the present because, well, it's gone, right? All we really have is speculation, or at best, circumstantial evidences of past events based on what we see in the present. That's not to say that we can't make intelligent guesses about the past or form reasonable inferences from rocks or fossils in the present, but we certainly cannot directly test our conclusions because we cannot repeat the past. Got it? So, does that mean historical science is unimportant? Not at all. Let's drop an example down here for a minute and take a look at the Eiffel Tower. You know, that 19th century Parisian monument designed by Gustave Eiffel that stands 1,063 feet tall, which was built as the entrance for the 1889 World's Fair and is still the tallest building in Paris today, visited by millions of people each year? Yeah, that one. Well, guess what? Everything I just told you is true, but how do we test it? Well, applying observational science, we can, of course, observe the Eiffel Tower anytime we're in Paris. It's here in the present. Then we can continue by testing the height and comparing it to all the other structures in Paris and confirm the claim that it is indeed the tallest building in Paris. But that's the extent of the kind of facts that can be proved by observational science in reference to this claim. How do we really know that Gustave designed it? How do we really know it was built in the 19th century as an entrance to the 1889 World's Fair? How do we really know how many people visited? That's all in the past. It can't be repeated. For that kind of information, we need to go outside the limits of observational science and discover what has been communicated to us through historical documents and eyewitness accounts. And furthermore, we have to believe those eyewitnesses and documents are trustworthy. The same is true when we talk about the origin of the earth. The earth is here. We all agree with that. So, does observational science confirm that the world was created by God? And are there trustworthy documents and eyewitness accounts that confirm it? Well, let's take the last part first. In short, what we're really asking is my original question: was anybody there to observe it? The answer is yes. God was there, and he told us how he created. He inspired people to write down his very words that became books that were compiled into a complete book called the Bible, which has been verified over and over again and has demonstrated itself to be totally trustworthy in all it claims and teaches. Even secular scholars will concede that the Bible accurately records historical events. Anyway, we have the most trustworthy revelation from the most trustworthy eyewitness. Now, what about observational science? Does it confirm the Bible? Yes. And what's extremely important to realize is the observable fact that the universe is logical and orderly. That makes sense only if its creator is logical and has imposed order on his creation. It doesn't make sense at all if the universe is just an accident of a huge explosion. Also, our minds are able to comprehend many things about the universe, and that's only possible if the creator of the mind gave us the ability and desire to explore the universe. It doesn't make sense if our brains are byproducts of chance because we couldn't trust their conclusions to ever be accurate. And lastly, it only makes sense that we can observe and repeat an experiment if the universe consistently obeys the same laws from day to day, which only makes sense if a lawgiver created it that way and upholds it. So to be bluntly honest, science itself, whether observational or historical, is only possible because God exists and the Bible is true. I could go on, but enough said.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this wonderful video, which explains the difference between the two types of science: the operational science that we can test in the laboratory to follow the laws that God put in His creation, and the historical science that deals with events that happened in the past. And we can check them not in the laboratory, but we can check them by the documentation that is there in the past. So let me just put a definition of the origin science. Origin science is a legal historical method. It's like looking at an accident where somebody is killed, for example, and you try to find some clues from the area around you to discover who is the killer. So you might find a knife, you might find a bullet, you might find a drug. So through this events, circumstantial evidence, you try to come to conclusion to find out who is the killer. And we sometimes, under this type of science, you find you come to conclusion that this person had committed this crime, and after a few years you have a different evidence and to prove that he is free and he is innocent and there was somebody else who committed the crime. So the historical science is looking at events in the past, and it is a unique event which is not repeated again. So the creation is a unique event that God created supernaturally, not using the laws of nature as we know them, but it is a supernatural event. It is something above the laws that govern the universe at the moment. So God created by His power, by His word. God created ex nihilo, that means from nothing. And the first law of physics says that the energy and matter cannot be created or destroyed. It changes each form from one form to another. Like water, if you heat the water, it becomes vapor. If you cool the water, it becomes ice. So it is the same thing, but you have changed its shape or character by putting energy in it or taking energy from it. So the origin science deals with events that happened in the past. It's a legal historical method. It is the use of eyewitness testimony if are available, and that would be great if you have a witness of the event and this witness is reliable and trustworthy, he can tell you what happened. Or circumstantial evidence. You can, as I said, a scene of a crime and you try to find out how this crime was committed. To determine the cause or causes of the past, something happened in the past, and it's unobservable. You cannot repeat it. You cannot repeat the accident to know who did the accident. Of course not. Or for a singular event that happened in the past. So let me do a little test with all of you. What I'm going to do here is to put these two arrows on the screen, as you can see, and I'll ask you one question. What was it originally? This structure, this drawing, what was it originally? And I'll pause for a moment, and I'd like everyone watching this program to put in his mind and in her mind what was these two arrows in the past. So what I am showing you now is two arrows in the present. And my question to you, what is this drawing, these two arrows were in the past? How did they look like? I hope everyone had an image in his or her mind about these two arrows. Let me just discuss the possibilities. Could they be like this in the past? Yeah, could be. Could it be like this in the past? That's a possibility. Could it be like this in the past? That's a possibility. Could it be like a complete circle? Yes, it could be. So what I showed you is two arrows in the present, and my question to you, what these arrows looked like in the past. I think most of us think of number D, which is a complete circle. But in actual fact, there was nothing missing. They were just two arrows in the past. So that really shows the difference between observational science and historical science. The observation at present is two arrows on the screen. And my question about a past event, how they looked like in the past. the answer really, you cannot give me an answer till I give you more information about what happened to this in the past. Because in actual fact, this drawing was like that in the past. It was not missing anything. So the observation science is important, but it has own limitation. We have 5 senses by which we recognize the material world that we live in. So we have the vision, we have the smell, we have the taste, we have the hearing, we have the touch. Anything that lies outside the 5 senses we cannot comprehend. Let me give you an example. We hear within a certain wave of the voice, and if this sound is too high frequency or too low frequency, we can't get it. So despite the fact we are able to hear, if the frequency of the sound is too fast or too slow, we cannot get it. We get it only within a certain range. That's why we have sound and we have ultrasound. And the ultrasound we can change into pictures, and we use it in medicine and other things as well. So what I'm trying to say here is there are 5 senses by which we recognize the material world. But these 5 senses are very important, but they are limited. So some of them cannot really take us further. That's why we need a revelation from God to understand the events that happened in the past. But we need to be sure that this revelation is true. And obviously, this is another big topic, the evidence of the truth of the Bible. And we will see a little video later on in our presentation to tell us about that in a minute. So we have 2 types of science, observational or operational science that we do in the laboratory, and we all agree about that. The atheist does this type of science, the Christian does this type of science. We come to the same conclusions, we come to the same results, and there is no problem with that. Our differences in the historical science, events that happened in the past. In the biblical view, we believe in the beginning God created the heavens and earth. The atheist or naturalistic point of view, they believe that matter is everything. And they believe that time, chance, and laws of nature will create anything over time. So that is the battleground, if you like. The area which we disagree about is the historical science, not the operational science. So let us start by discussing the secular starting point. The first assumption of this starting point is nature is all that exists. There is no spiritual world. There is no God. There is no spirit. All what we have is matter. All the material things that we have in the present world is what we have, and we don't have anything else. There is no God. There is no eternity. There is nothing except the matter, material things. And the second thing they believe in, that everything can and indeed must be explained by 3 things. By time, give me millions and millions and millions of years. By time, by chance, by laws of nature working on matter. So they believe that by passing of time, that can change things and create new things. And actually, passing of time is not a creative power. Passing of time makes the things which are organized disorganized according to the second law of thermodynamics. So the starting point for the atheist is nature is all that exists, nothing more than that. There is no spirit at all. Number 2, everything can and must be explained by 3 things: by time, chance, and laws of nature working on the matter. That's what we call religion of atheism, who don't believe in God, or we call it naturalism. So they believe only in natural procedures and natural events in the present. Let me just quote one of the scientists who said that even if all the evidence prove there is a God, we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. So he's saying, Even if we can't explain things by naturalistic procedures only, we cannot invoke intelligent creator to explain the origin of living creatures. And we know life comes from life. Chemical reactions will not produce a cell, a living cell. It has to come from a living creator. But despite this basic fact, this scientist is saying we cannot allow a divine foot in the door of the laboratory. Can you imagine that? So the problem is not science against faith or against the Bible. The problem is naturalistic, materialistic way of explaining life, which cannot explain life in actual fact, is against the biblical revelation of God created the heavens and earth. So let us have few examples. If you look at a cloud like this, you can say, yes, this is a product of time, chance, and laws of nature, because water evaporated from the oceans and it went up to the area where it's very cold, so it is condensed, and this is according to the laws of nature and formed this shape of a cloud. That's absolutely time, chance, and laws of nature. But if you find a word written like apple on top of this cloud, would you say this happened by time, chance, and the laws of nature? Impossible, because apple has a meaning. Apple has it's a language. It needs intelligence to understand it and to write it. So if you find something with intelligence, that means there is a creator. Let us have another example. If you look at this little rock, which is fallen, we'll not say how the rock is formed, let us say it is there, right? You can look at this and say, yes, there was some wind and rain which affected this rock and fell on that direction, depending on the laws of gravity, and that is absolutely time, chance, and laws of nature. But if you go to Mount Rushmore in America and you find the head of the previous presidents of the United States of America engraved in this rock, can you stand in front of this rock and say, look at the time, chance, and laws of nature? There was wind and rain and formed this engraving of the mountain to have the faces of the previous USA presidents. You cannot come to that conclusion, because this means there is an intelligence, there is a designer who designed these different cars in the mountain. Let me just show you.
Picture question.
Let me just show you this little video about the wings of the bat, and this engineer is trying to see how it works and try to form that in the laboratory to help him to develop something about the wings. And he is thinking that nature just created itself. But let us just go through this experience, and then we have a conclusion of our meeting together. So let us listen to this video.
The big picture question that we're asking is, how do bats fly, and what attributes of bat wings and flight performance can I mimic in trying to build my own robotic wings? I think bats are just really amazing, spectacular flyers. Their wings are extremely dynamic, so much more dynamic than birds or insects. If you look at the wings of a bat, they're just like our hands. They have all these joints that let their wings adapt into lots of different shapes, giving them a tremendous range of aerodynamic forces and maneuverabilities. They fly much better than anything we've engineered, really anything we've dreamed of engineering. And I would just love to figure out how that works and then try to duplicate it. The overall research project has two components. One component is trying to study bat flight in terms of the anatomy of the wing structure, the material properties of the bones and the skin, looking at the physiology, looking at the wing motions and the aerodynamics. And then the other half takes all of those different components together and tries to mimic them and build them into some sort of a robotic flapper. Throughout my graduate experience, I've become both a biologist and an engineer. I started off, during my undergrad, I had a strong biology background, and I was more of a field biologist running around the jungle catching bats. And then when I came to graduate school, I wanted to study flight,
which required a bit more of an engineering background. I needed to take the extra time to learn the engineering. The Graduate Research Fellowship gave me the extra time to really focus on that aspect of my education, so that now I'm at a point where I am very much both biologist and engineer. Not only did we mimic the shape and many of the material properties of an actual bat wing, we also mimicked the motions. So the joints and everything were aligned in a way that they could move at the appropriate speeds and magnitudes. So I would put the wing into a wind tunnel and flap it at realistic kinematics. I'm able to recreate the motions fairly accurately of the real bat wing, but to do so I have to use very large motors that weigh much more than a real bat. It really kind of tells you how spectacular muscle is. There's nothing else that's able to produce as much force or power in as small and light of a volume as muscle. I think in many ways our creativity and our imagination is limited by our inspiration. When I was building the robot, there was many times that I would get stuck, that something would break, and I didn't know how to fix it. And whenever I came up against one of those walls, I was able to look to nature to see how they would fix it and take that inspiration and be able to use it to improve my own model and fix any problems. So there was a lot of things that I learned from trying to build a bat, and particularly the failures in trying to build a bat, that told me much about the biology. Our elbow kept breaking in one particular spot, and we noticed that the real bat wings are reinforced in that same area. So far, I've not been able to produce anything that worked better than nature. The materials that nature is able to produce and the motors that nature is able to produce are still so much more spectacular.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this video and watching it. Because this engineer and biologist was studying the wings of the bat, and he is trying to imitate this in the laboratory. And he said when he put all the joints in the wings of the bat in the laboratory, the weight of this material that he put was bigger than the weight of the bat itself. And he's thinking of Mother Nature. He's thinking that nature can form this complicated structure and completed being just by chance and time and laws of nature. That is really illogical. That goes against the operational science, because in the operational science, you need all the facts together to bring this wing. And for this wing to function, it needed all these accurate measurements and weights and the joints and the ability to fly. All of these things cannot happen by chance and time and laws of nature. If you give me millions and millions of years, this wing will not develop by itself. It needs a designer. It needs a creator. And that goes more with the biblical starting point. In the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. I remember one time an atheist came to me and said, I know who you are, you believe in creation, I'm not going to shake hands with you. I said, okay, welcome. And he said to me, your creation idea, you believe in creation, is against science. I said, not really, because if you don't believe in God the Creator, you have to believe in the beginning there was nothing, and nothing had exploded and formed everything. This is not logical and not scientific. But I have a better starting point, because I believe, according to the Bible, from the first verse in the first chapter of the first book in the book of Genesis, in the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. Beginning is the time. God is the source of intelligence and power. Heaven and earth is matter and space. So in the first verse in the Bible, there is more science than in the beginning there was nothing and nothing had exploded. I'm afraid our time is gone, but I'm looking forward to meeting you again and next week, and we will discuss the biblical starting point to see if it is logical or not, because we believe in the beginning God created the heavens and earth. So what we studied today, let me just summarize what we learned, and we will develop that as we go along during our program, to be able to give an answer, ready to give an answer to those who are asking and about the reason of hope that we possess in the Lord Jesus Christ. We do that with gentleness and respect. and we respect all other views, and we welcome all the questions that anybody might have, and will be delighted to enter into a real dialogue with anybody who wants to challenge us about what we are offering in this program. So let me summarize again. Today we studied how to think, and we tried to answer the question of, is there a contradiction between the Bible and science? And in order to answer this question properly, we need to define what is science and what is the Bible. So today we defined what is science. Science is knowledge, and there are two types of knowledge: operational science that we do in the laboratory to find the patterns repeated under the same conditions, getting the same results, and there is no problem with that type of science with the Bible. The area of difference is historical science, events that happened in the past that we cannot repeat in the present. Like creation, it's a unique act of God, so we can't apply the laws of nature now on the creation, which is a unique act, a supernatural act of God. In the evolution theory, it needs millions of years, so we cannot run an observational operation for millions of years. So it depends on the starting point. So we studied the atheist starting point, which is matter is all what exists. Time, chance, and laws of nature are the mechanism by which anything can happen. And we discovered that is not enough to create life, because life has to come from life. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to meeting you again in the next session. God bless. Amen.